Okay, we're gonna look at some things. I will throw too much at you. You can go back and look at the stuff, or you can just take the main points, which is what I'm trying to do. So we're gonna look at, well, who are progressives? And then some key points in talking to progressives, talk about climate justice, and then we're gonna talk about how to talk about CCL key issue areas with progressives. So we want to understand different progressive points of view and how social and economic factors relate to the progressive ideologies. Second, we want to learn about communication strategies for progressive members of Congress to organizations and to progressive leaders. And then finally, look at strategies to apply the policy agenda to progressive individuals and groups. So who are progressives? Well, actually, it's not monolith. There's a lot of different folks. Basically, a progressive, and this concept has been around for well over 100 years, is someone for progress. And by progress, they mean progress in meeting the needs of people, usually as opposed to business. But the progress is both economic, with more equality of income and wealth, a better safety net, and less corporate, but more people power. The US history, it has shifted to extreme corporate power, to less, to extreme, and that tends to be the way it goes. They also, progressives feel like at certain times the free market and capitalism fail people. And I think that is a historical fact, but it certainly is a belief characteristic of pretty much all progressives. But some progressives are more social than economic, although they're obviously intertwined. And socially, they're looking at social justice and racial justice as very key concepts. And women's right and rights for other underserved, underprivileged groups of the society. Now, I said that there's, come on. Oh, and of course, gender identity rights as well. Now, I said that there's a range, and there really is, and you talking to some people will be very different than talking to others. I'm sorry, I accidentally moved it there. So on the economic scale and on the social scale, we have those who feel like we need change quickly versus those who want to change, but it should be more gradual and not as extreme. And that's going to be the case. And you will find your experiences talking to progressives very different. Now, when we look at Congress, even the strongest progressives in Congress have a strong practical bend. And so they will never advocate for what many progressives would, at least not in their role in Congress, as destroying corporate power, redistributing wealth, and making very rapid changes towards the social changes we need. So, key points in connecting with progressives. First of all, good communication. I think you probably have or will have a segment on communicating. And those good communicating practices are always valuable for whoever you talk to, including progressives. You want to connect them before you communicate. Most progressives will see what you say more positively if they see that you are progressive, you're committed to their values. And so that becomes an important piece of communication. And in doing that, the focus is on relationships first, not concepts, never arguments. You connect first, then you communicate. You respect silence and boundaries that some people have, and be understanding, be humble. Don't feel like you have all the answers, and if they disagree, they're wrong. Maintain some humility. But those are just basic communication things as well. So here are things that are important to many or most progressives. First, in terms of climate policy or legislation, they know we have to cut greenhouse gases quickly, and so that's an important element. So they're aware that it is urgent that we act soon. They are concerned about greenwashing, having Republicans pass a climate bill that does nothing, that allows them to go to their voters and say, look what a great climate bill I passed. And so that sometimes will come up with congresspersons or with others. Something that big business can't torpedo, because there's a sense that in many cases bills have been passed and then big business has figured out a way to make it ineffective. It is important that it helps the lower income, the people that are hurting the most now, and especially that it's good for the environmental justice community, and we'll talk more of that later. Here are some common misperceptions that some progressive have, okay? And one of them is, it hasn't worked, so it won't work. So if somebody has tried a carbon price and it didn't work out, then no carbon price can work. Often you try several variations of something before it works, but it's an easy way to say, I'm not going to consider that. Another one is like, if Exxon is for it, it must be bad. Exxon can be for some, is probably for some bad things to progressives and for some good things for progressives. We really need to analyze it, but that is one thing that will come up. If you tell them, look, Exxon has gotten on the board of the Climate Leadership Council and therefore carbon fee and dividend, there are a number of people who will say, oh, okay, it must be a bad bill. So you don't go there. Okay, big business can and will kill it. I have heard people say, okay, if we put a fee on a big business, well, first of all, that they will not be able to implement it at all, or they will kill the effects by passing on all of the increase in they believe that business will pass on all of the increases of, say, a carbon pollution fee and continue their normal profits, and it won't do any good. Now, I think factually and economically that's incorrect, but that is one of the views you'll come across. There are a number of progressives who do not want to compromise with anything they think is wrong. There are a number of significant progressive groups in Texas working on the Gulf Coast who thought the Inflation Reduction Act, an amazing bill with lots of environmental justice stuff, was a bad bill because in order to get it in there, they had some stuff about making it easier to build pipelines and certain other things. Okay, the idea that if we eat right and live right, then the whole thing will be fixed is not true, but sometimes there are progressives who focus on that. They want to act now with no transition. You can't. There has to be a transition. If we outlawed all fossil fuels immediately, our economy would collapse, even with everything else going full boat. And finally, they want to change everything at once. Again, I believe we need a lot of change, but I also believe we need to be aware of what we're doing and its effects. And of course, so you want to avoid triggering defenses. That will probably ruin your communication. So don't say that this is the only solution. Don't even say that this is the most important solution. If they have another solution that they think is more important, don't contradict them. We need all the solutions. Remember that specific bills have compromises, and so it's not whether or not it's a bill, even a carbon pricing bill, but it's what is in that bill. We want, again, back to the endorsed by big oil and big business can trigger the defenses, and Anti-regulation talk. We talk anti-regulations with Republicans, but we don't talk anti-regulations with progressives. And the truth is, there can be too many regulations, and we've got to have some regulations. Even the Republicans would believe that, but they talk that triggers them to hear that. All right, now, in terms of members of Congress, of progressive members of Congress, they are responsive to constituents and especially to progressive organizations. They are sensitive to voters' reactions, so they want to know their voters' reactions. They're more open to compromise than the average progressive because they know that's the only way things get done on the Hill. They're very open to facts and studies. There are some progressives who have an ideology, and if the facts or the science doesn't meet their ideology, then they may push something else. And finally, you want to, as with every member of Congress, you want to connect their priorities to climate change and not just give the list of what you think are the most important things. That's okay. All right, so does anyone have any questions at this point? I have a lot more to say. I just wanted to give it a pause for that. I can't see you, so I'm relying on Ricky.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dylan is shaking his head, and it doesn't look like.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're good to go.
All right, now climate justice, which can also be called environmental justice pretty much because the two are, right now, they're totally intertwined, is a really important issue for progressives. So what is climate justice? It simply is, it recognizes the disproportionate impacts of climate change on low-income communities and communities of color around the world, the people and places least responsible for the problem. And as we have a clean energy transition, even if we do it as smoothly as possible, there are people who will be hurt, and the people who are likely to be hurt most if we don't take care of their needs are these people that climate justice focuses on. And so some of the key things for climate justice are, as we do the transition, it is a just transition, meaning we don't ignore their needs and their problems. We need to note that environmental justice is intricately connected with social and racial justice, and so those are involved too. There is also a focus on indigenous climate action. Those people, it's important to get them involved in the climate work and the climate and the decisions, and they're another especially oppressed group. Community resilience and adaptation. Now here is where a lot of focus is, because every time there's a weather disaster, they get the least help from the federal emergency from FEMA, and it is the hardest for them to adapt to problems. It hurts everybody, but it hurts these people most. They generally are live in the most flood-prone areas. They're in the most flimsy housing, and so all of that. Natural climate solutions are something that are seen as a good type of solution among the environmental justice community. And there needs to be a lot of climate education engagement of the frontline communities in the work. Now, progressives put a high priority on climate justice. I'm repeating it because it's really important. Now, I just mentioned that the Inflation Reduction Act, it has a lot of climate justice stuff in it, special provisions, and yet some of the frontline organizations opposed it because that's all they are interested in. I don't believe, the Sierra Club did not believe even though they are extremely sensitive to climate justice groups, that the Inflation Reduction Act was anything but a very good thing. Okay, the transition to clean energy will ultimately greatly benefit underserved communities, but on the way, it's going to be a rocky road for them. And so we should be aware of that. And the progressive legislators are especially concerned that that's taken care of. The number one objection of progressives to the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act was that higher prices hurt poor folks and revenues didn't go mostly to manage the just transition. I got it from a number of progressive members, and when I was able to overcome this, they signed on as a co-sponsor, even though it wasn't their favorite way to deal with it. If a CCL bill helps stop climate change, again, normally the climate justice issues would be the main reason progressives would oppose it. If it does a lot of environmental damage, that's another one, but this is the big one. So in interacting with and supporting climate justice communities, one of the principles of environmental justice is that we practice self-education. We learn what their problems are. We learn what they're experiencing so we can better relate to them. We want to elevate the voices of impacted communities. We don't simply learn about them and figure out what they need and then go tell people. We involve them in speaking for themselves. That is the ultimate goal of climate justice work. We want to hold representatives accountable for what they promise and what they do, and we need to listen and demonstrate compassion as we talk to members of the impacted communities. This is showing in Jackson, Mississippi, their water infrastructure collapsed, and there was no longer fresh water. And of course, the lower income people got hit the worst. And this is showing that there were drives to collect water. They even ran out of bottled water, and so they had to fly it in. But this was a case where advocacy was done, in this case by the NAACP, to help the people. Okay, I'm now going to move. Does anyone have any questions about climate justice before I move on to the last section?
No hands are raised, Bob, so you're good.
Okay, so now I'm going to go into some of the more specific things about the CCL bills and policies that we're advocating for. Now, once again, what they're looking for, progressives are looking for, is they do want those greenhouse gas emissions to go down quickly. They want to move the clean energy economy with equity, with justice, and they want they're concerned with environmental justice issues, including the serious health effects that fossil fuels are causing. So here are the 4 areas we're going to talk about: the carbon pricing, the healthy forests, the building electrification and efficiency, and the clean energy permitting reform. I'm not going to go to details on these. I'm sure you have gotten it or will get it in another session. Okay, new carbon pricing world. We have a change in attitudes and in DC. The CCL experts, and I totally agree, believe that right now it would be very hard to pass the type of carbon pricing bill that we had been advocating for until this last election. But there is an angle in which we may get carbon pricing through a Congress that was dominated by conservatives. And it has to do with the carbon border adjustment mechanism. That's basically essentially a type of a tariff or a subsidy on goods that have, if one country has a carbon price and another doesn't, that creates an unfair advantage for the country that's doing more carbon pollution. And so this would be a fee that would simply neutralize that would equalize that. Now, the World Trade Organization requires a carbon price if you're doing a carbon border adjustment. That's one of the reasons for having it. And so if we continue to follow the international laws, that is a strong reason for doing a carbon price, even if the bill is about carbon border adjustment mechanism. Progressives, though, would still see, oh, this is going to cut our carbon pollution. That's okay. That's the reason for me to support it. So when we get to that kind of a bill, they're still going to be. They are concerned with jobs and economy, but they're more concerned with the serious consequences we're heading for if we don't fix our climate change. Now, in our bill, the carbon pollution fee or would have applied to everything in the economy. The new one would only apply to some sectors, primarily what are called high carbon sectors, like steel, like concrete, and so those would get the carbon price, whereas everything wouldn't. Now, the fee would almost certainly exempt gasoline, because if it doesn't, people are very sensitive to their gasoline going up, and the oil and gas industry would be delighted to have a scapegoat in a carbon fee to pin on that. So almost certainly that will be exempted. There would be performance standards before any carbon pollution had a fee attached to it. With this, it would be only if the carbon pollution exceeded some set standard amount. Now, progressives, whatever works. I mean, and progressives are looking whatever we can pass that does a lot of good. So I don't think you'll get a lot on this, although some of the industries may get cut a deal that the progressives don't like, and that might keep them from supporting it. And the new carbon pricing, well, it would be revenue agnostic. The revenue, they negotiate where the revenue would go. It would not automatically go to help poor people or help for a just transition. And that, of course, could be an issue for the members of the more progressive members. All right. Does a carbon fee and dividend, or a carbon pricing and a carbon pollution fee and carbon cashback, would it help? The answer is, overall, okay, when the carbon fee would, if it went into effect, then it goes on everything. So that means the people who buy the most stuff pay more of the carbon fee effect, and the people who buy less get less. And so when you look at how it works, 61% of the households would get more in the dividend or the cashback than they would be charged in higher prices for the stuff they buy. That's significant. And of course, in this bottom 20%, 96% of them would come out ahead. But not just that they come out ahead, but they have a bigger gap. In other words, it's almost like this whole process puts money in their pockets. For example, those on the lower end of this ladder with a smaller carbon footprint, they would get a cashback of $1,000, and their costs would be, say, $430. And this was just based on modeling. And that would mean they were getting $570 extra back I think that was the first year. That is a lot of money. And presenting this kind of data to the head of the Progressive Caucus in the House was what convinced her to sign on as a co-sponsor of the EICDA. And in fact, many progressives signed on, not immediately, but CCL worked on them, I think, and a lot of them came. So look, over half of the Progressive Caucus members did co-sponsor. And of the Energy Innovation Act co-sponsors, over half of them were progressives. There were more non-progressive Democrats than progressives, and yet the progressive members did it in a larger number than did the rest of the Democrats. So they saw that this would help, and many of them signed on to it. I believe that most of the other 97 would have voted for it if it had come up in the bill, but they did not want to go on record as supporting it because some of the negative things, and that's something that many progressives are going to do. If it has good and bad, it doesn't have a chance to pass. They don't want to be supporting something that has the bad, because people can take it out of context and, well, he supported a bill that did this bad thing. So that is one of the concerns of many of those progressive members of Congress. Okay, moving on to building electrification and efficiency. The landmark climate legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, has two basic pillars. One of them is to switch dirty energy to clean energy, and the other is to electrify everything possible, including buildings. The IRA did a huge amount towards advancing both of these. In essence, with that in place, there was no need to pass another bill on electrification and efficiency because it was there in loads. So, and it has boosted clean energy progress. Now, you put into place a program and it doesn't the first day make the changes. There are hundreds of solar and wind projects who are in process. They have not yet started generating electricity, so they don't show up in the numbers, but they had to be done to get to this point to enable to get us to a point where we need less electricity in the future. Now, though, the Republican Party has said they want to repeal the IRA, at least certain people in the administration. And the most important thing we can do for building electrification and efficiency is to fight the repeal of the Inflation Reduction Act, especially the clean energy tax credits. We need that clean energy. As we get it cleaner, that electricity we use becomes cleaner as well. Next area is clean energy permitting reform. And there is a big piece of permitting reform that isn't obvious, but it's a part of what we support, and that is for getting more transmission lines. So some of the concerns, okay, first of all, most of the progressives are aware we need transmission lines. They also are aware that solar and wind is taking too long to develop. And they would love to make that process quicker. So, but one concern is there enough time for environmental impact statements? We don't want to build transmission lines or solar or wind farms that are going to hurt endangered species and so forth. So that is a concern. Another concern is that compromise will include fossil fuel reforms, and these progressives will hate. And I can assure you, if over the foreseeable future, any clean energy permitting reform that can get passed will have to have fossil fuel permitting reforms as well. The Sierra Club and others, but especially the Sierra Club, is especially concerned about this because they have blocked or stalled dozens of fossil fuel projects by calling on especially the first Trump administration for not following the law, taking it to court, and stopping the project completely. And the more a project is delayed, the more it costs and the more likely it is to be canceled. But it's going to have fossil fuel reforms. I personally think we have to do some compromise, and that what is the right balance is one of the keys. But if we can continue to build solar and wind farms, it's going to outcompete fossil fuels. In Texas, whatever capacity for solar and wind there is the first thing that goes onto the grid. And then if they need more, then the fossil fuels come online. And it's because wind and solar are cheaper, especially their fuel costs. So we have to focus on they are concerned that those reforms will actually increase the greenhouse gases, that the solar and wind, that the permitting for reform change will help them much more than it does, and so forth. They also are concerned that it will hurt environmental justice communities, and unfortunately, it will, because people whose money don't like to be near energy plants or polluting plants, and EJ communities have to buy where they can afford, and so they end up right in the areas that are most hurt. And finally, they're concerned that if we start relaxing the environmental and public health protections, that it will continue and accelerate until we have less chance. So the details is key in permitting reform, and it may be that some progressives will say, yeah, we got to stop this for climate change, but I don't want to go on record as saying that we can open wide the gates to let more fossil fuel exports and more pipelines be built. But if the vote comes down to it, I'm going to take it. I'm going to decide what is best for the country. And that is what I think that they will do. So failing to get a co-sponsor is not necessarily a failure. Okay. See. Okay. The next area is healthy forests. Oops, I'm sorry, I don't know what I did.
You're all good. We see the slide that you've got up right now about healthy forest.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I lost it. Excuse me for a minute.
Sure.
Okay, and now I got it again. I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay, healthy forests. This is an area, one of the reasons CCL took it on, where I believe both progressives and conservatives will generally support. There are a few concerns that I have heard progressive members of Congress advance. One of them is this is going to put a lot of money in we're gonna pay farmers to protect their forests, and that's going to give a whole bunch of money to corporate farms, which is not going to help our farming situation but hurt it. Plus, it's not a good use of money to do that. So that has been one of the concerns that I have heard, and once again, there may be a balance between the harm and the good that it does. Some may well oppose the lack of environmental justice benefits. None of the bills that I have seen would have any benefits, except the very important one that eventually we may solve climate change, and that's even more important to the EJ community. And it will have more effect on the EJ community than the rest of us, but it doesn't help during the transition. Now, there is a particular bill that CCL is currently supporting where most progressives oppose it, and that this includes the Sierra Club. So I want to tell you why they are proposing it. One of the main reasons is the exceptions to the environmental impact statements and court challenges. So if a particular project was designated and it was seen by the environmental community to be terrible for the environment, normally they could look to the environmental impact statement and challenge it in court. Fix Our Forest Act takes that away from certain actions because we need to deal with wildfires quickly. We can't wait 5 years while everything goes through a process. And so it's a tough question, but that is a major reason that they oppose it, and of course they're concerned that more and more things will become exceptions to the current process that is trying to protect the environment and secure the health of the people. Now, it does exempt some areas of the forest from any of that stuff. Just like you have a watershed, I think they have something called a forest shed or a fire shed. Now I forget exactly, but it's the same concept. And the idea is the fire starts and then it accelerates up the slopes to where it gets out of control. So the best practices there are best practices for dealing with it. And one of them is not clear cutting. That's actually would be a bad practice. But the concern is that this would exempt these large area of forest to that, and the federal workers, the federal administrators could say, yes, we want to open up this area to be clear cutting so there won't be trees that can burn to start it. And if there are no environmental impact statements and there can be no court challenges, the logging industry will say, yippee, and they will go all out for that. Now, I believe that as intended, this is not going to happen because clear cutting and other harmful logging practices are if not forbidden, discouraged. And they are mentioned that it will follow the best practices. But I believe that is a concern. And I know that many CCLers are completely dismissive of that concern. I am not. I believe we need to stop the wildfires more badly, and it's worth taking a risk on this. And hopefully, we'll get some people. Make sure we get people who will follow the laws, and in which it's case. Okay, let's see. I think that is the last thing I have. Okay. I'm not getting any movement, and I have to get another slide. Why won't it go? There we go. Okay, of course, there is another slide. So what can you do in terms of getting progressives on board? Well, one is to focus on building trust by working with people at the local level. And if possible, you can join in mutual efforts. When I first started talking about a carbon price to local progressive organizations, they all rejected it out of hand. After I was seen as one of the working the hardest on progressive issues, they were inclined to believe me before I even made my presentation. I'm sorry. So building trust, if you have the time, and you can't do it with every organization. Being retired, I was able to do it with more than most. This also, though, includes building trust with your progressive congressperson, because as the more they see that we are sensitive to these progressive issues, and believe me, CCL is, then they feel better about supporting what we support. And it just creates a challenge. So if the Sierra Club goes one way and CCL the other, which way do they go? And of course, they have to think it through themselves. Make sure when you talk to progressives, don't focus on CCL. Don't even start on CCL stuff. but ask them what they're working on and why, and commend them if you like what they're doing, and show interest. You also can join the Climate Environmental Justice Action Team. That's one of a number of action teams, and they're working to improve them even more than where they were. And of course, you can feel free to share what you learned with your chapter. As you talk to people, remember to be interested in what they have to say. Don't just try to be for yourself to be interesting to them, and you'll have much better interactions.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.